Hello friends, welcome to my channel Odi Sapari. Dare to be wise. Myself, Deep Kumar Ghosh, a student of 3rd BHMS, Midnapur Homeopathic Medical College and Hospital. Today, I am going to start a series of lecture on inflammation. The whole lecture will consist of 3 parts. Today in the part 1, I am going to discuss about the definition of acute inflammation, vascular events which are taking place in acute inflammation, and the cardinal signs of acute inflammation, right? So let's start. Definition of acute inflammation. Inflammation is the response of vascularized tissue against any injury or infection where the blood flow and the permeability of the microcirculation are increased for the recruitment of leukocyte to eliminate the cause of infection, to localize the infection and pave the way for repairing, right? Now I'm going to explain each and every term. What is inflammation? It is the response of vascularized tissue against any injury or infection. For say, any microbe, any bacteria has seeded in a tissue, or any mechanical injury, external mechanical injury to any tissue, right? Any kind of injury or infection to a tissue has occurred. So the tissue will respond in its own way against that injury or infection, right? So that is inflammation. And how it is going to respond against that infection or injury? By increasing the blood flow and permeability of the microcirculation, right? The blood flow to the area of injury or infection will be increased, and the permeability of the microcirculation will be increased. Okay, so what is microcirculation? Microcirculation consists of arteriole, capillary and venule. These three combiningly consists microcirculation, right? Arteriole, capillary and venule. So blood flow and the permeability of the microcirculation will be increased. And why it will be increased? It will be increased for the recruitment of leukocyte. In case of acute inflammation, the leukocyte will be neutrophil, and in case of chronic inflammation, the leukocyte will be lymphocyte, right? So actually, in case of now today we are talking about acute inflammation, so we will be talking about the neutrophil, right? So for the recruitment of neutrophil, so what neutrophil will do? It is a phagocytic cell, right? So it will, for say the microbe is present over there in that tissue, and neutrophil will come and it will engulf it and then destroy it, right? So it will eliminate the cause of infection. Here the cause of infection or inflammation is the microbe, the bacteria. So it will eliminate the infection, the cause of infection, or it will localize the infection. It will not allow the bacteria to spread all over, right? So it will try to localize the infection, and by engulfing the bacteria, it will pave the way for repairing. It will, it will make the way for repairing, right? So that is the definition of inflammation, acute inflammation. It's a very good definition. If you want, you can snapshot it, right? Okay, so I'm going to the next slide. So next topic that will be discussed today is the vascular events that are taking place in acute inflammation. Okay, so the first step is transient vasoconstriction. I will discuss each and every step in detail, right? So that is transient vasoconstriction first. Second is progressive and persistent vasodilatation. Third is angiogenesis. The fourth one is increased permeability of the microcirculation. The fifth is hemoconcentration, and the sixth is stasis. Okay, so now I will be going to discuss the each and every step in a detailed manner. So first, transient vasoconstriction. Now for say you hit on your own arm or your own wrist, there will be a sensation of, there will be generation of a reflex, right? So as soon as you hit on your arm or your forearm, whenever, whatever, wherever, so there will be a transient vasoconstriction due to neurogenic reflex. The nerves will produce reflex, a sudden pain, a sudden jerk, a sudden injury will produce a neurogenic reflex. So that will produce a transient vasoconstriction. It will be, very small time, a very small time. That is why it is called as transient vasoconstriction due to neurogenic reflex. Okay. Now, the next step is progressive and persistent vasodilatation. It's a very important step, progressive and persistent vasodilatation. Why the vasodilatation is occurring? Because if we want to recruit the leukocyte to the area of infection, we need to recruit more and more leukocyte. So our body will, the tissue, actually it is all the things which are happening is done by our own tissue, the chemical mediators produced by the tissue. Okay, I will discuss about the chemical mediators later on. The thing is to increase the blood flow to the area of inflammation, right? We need to recruit more and more leukocyte. We need to uh, increase the blood flow to the area. Okay, now that is done by vasodilatation. More vasodilatation, and it is progressive, continuously the vessels are dilating continuously, it is dilating, and it is persistent. In case of vasoconstriction, we learned that it was transient for a small time, but it is progressive, continuously vessels are dilating, and it is persistent, continuous, right? So it is progressive and persistent vasodilatation. Now, what are the chemical mediators which are responsible for that vasodilatation? That is histamine, kinins, serotonin, nitric oxide, and prostaglandin. These are the chemical mediators which are responsible for the vasodilatation, right? Okay. Now, what happens? What is the effect of that vasodilatation and increased blood flow? The increased blood flow leads to local rise of temperature. Whenever there is an inflammation, there is swelling, and we feel that local rise of temperature of that area, and it is known as calor. It is a cardinal sign of acute inflammation, that is calor, local rise of temperature of that area. Okay. Now we are moving on to our next slide, that is angiogenesis. Angiogenesis means synthesis of new blood vessel. Genesis means, synthesis. Angio means vessel. So new blood vessel formation is angiogenesis. Why angiogenesis occurs? It occurs due to supply more blood to the area. The aim is same, just to recruit more and more leukocyte, more and more neutrophil to the area of inflammation or infection, to engulf more and more microbes, right? Though inflammation is pathological, but it is helpful for us. It is a good thing. Inflammation is a right thing, because either it removes the cause of inflammation, or it localized the cause of infection. So it doesn't spread all over, right? So why angiogenesis occurs? Just to supply more blood to the area of inflammation. And how the angiogenesis occurs? By the angiogenic factors. Angiogenic factors like transforming growth factor beta, transforming growth factor alpha, endothelial factor 4, etc. Right? So that is angiogenesis. If you want, you can snapshot it again. right? So the next step, the next event is increased permeability of the microcirculation. Increased permeability of the microcirculation, right? Now, what happens if we need to recruit the leukocyte neutrophil to the area of inflammation? We need to, transport the fluid from the vascular compartment to the interstitium, right? So how it happens? How it happens? That is by increased hydrostatic pressure and decreased osmotic pressure. Now it will be explained. I know, the Starling law. It can be explained with the Starling law. What happens, normally how the nutrients, how oxygens are supplied to the tissue by these formula, Starling law, by the Starling law. What happens at the arteriolar end? At the arteriolar end, the hydrostatic pressures are more. The hydrostatic pressure that generates a tendency of the fluid to come out of the blood vessel and supply, or come out of the blood vessel and come to the interstitium, to the tissues. It is the hydrostatic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure generates the tendency to the fluid to come out of the blood vessel and coming up to the tissue. That is hydrostatic pressure. And the osmotic pressure, that is the osmolarity, which is generated by the plasma proteins, that tends to retain the water within the, fluid tends to retain the fluid within the blood vessel. So the two functions are going on. One is hydrostatic pressure that generates the tendency to the fluid to come out of the blood vessel and come to the tissue space, and the osmotic pressure which tries to, or which tends to retain the fluid within the blood vessel. Now, as the blood flow in the arteriolar end is more, the hydrostatic pressure, the blood volume is more, the hydrostatic pressure will be more, and the blood or fluid comes out through that area, through the arteriolar end, or through the capillary and to the tissues. And as in the venular end, as the fluid already leaked out, so in the venular end, the hydrostatic pressure will be less, as the volume has been lost, the fluid is already into the interstitium. So in the blood vessel, the blood volume is reduced, so the hydrostatic pressure at the post capillary venule will be less, whereas the osmotic pressure will be more. So the fluid again come into the blood vessel through the venular end. So that is the normal process. Normally how the tissue is getting nutrition and oxygen, that is the method, by the increased hydrostatic pressure at the arteriolar end and increased osmotic pressure and decreased hydrostatic pressure at the venular end. In this way the fluid is coming out from the vessel to the interstitium and again coming back to the vessel through the venular end. That is the normal process. But in case of inflammation, what happens? In case of inflammation, there is endothelial retraction and endothelial contraction. Okay, endothelial retraction and endothelial contraction. What is the difference between endothelial retraction and contraction? The endothelial lining, in the endothelial, in the blood vessel, there is endothelial lining. So when the endothelial cells, each and every endothelial cell is shrunken, right? When each and every endothelial cell gets shrunken, they become small, shrunken, contracted. That is contraction. They become shrunken. And when two endothelial cell makes distance from each other, they get far away from each other, they try to get away from each other, that is retraction. So endothelial contraction and endothelial retraction. Okay, Endothelial contraction is regulated by the chemical mediators like histamine, bradykinin, leukotrienes, C4, D4, E4, C5A, C3A, right? These are the chemical mediators. I will give a lecture on chemical mediators of inflammation and how they are prepared. You know, like they are prepared from the arachidonic acid cycle, lipooxygenase cycle, and cyclooxygenase cycle. You know, cyclooxygenase cycle releases prostaglandin, and the lipooxygenase cycle releases leukotrienes. Right? These are the things. I will discuss it later on. So this is endothelial contraction and endothelial retraction. The two endothelial cells are going far away from each other, and that makes the gap in the blood vessel through which the fluid leaks. Okay, that is done by interleukin 1 and tumor necrosis factor, right? These are the interleukin 1 tumor necrosis factor. These are kinins, right? So interleukin 1 tumor necrosis factor, they are responsible for the endothelial retraction, and both the endothelial contraction and endothelial retraction, both of them helps in the leaking of fluid from the vascular compartment to the interstitium. Why? Just to recruit the leukocyte to the tissue space, to the tissue area of injury. So that is why the in this way, the permeability of the microcirculation is increased. Okay, in two ways: endothelial contraction and endothelial retraction. Now, in normally what happened? In normal condition, the hydrostatic pressure is normally high in the arteriolar end. Here also the hydrostatic pressure is high, just because of the increased blood volume, because the blood flow is already increased, so the hydrostatic pressure will be increased. So fluid will leak out into the interstitium. Now the fluid normally comes back to the vessel due to the increased osmotic pressure and reduced hydrostatic pressure in the venular end. But in case of inflammation, as the fluid containing protein, the plasma protein rich fluid comes into the interstitium, so the osmotic pressure, the plasma proteins which are responsible for the osmolarity, that is already in the interstitium. So the osmotic pressure in inflammation in the venular end will be less, will be reduced. You got it? The osmotic pressure in the venular end will be reduced because through the capillary, due to the endothelial contraction and retraction, the protein rich fluid, the protein which is responsible for the osmolarity, the osmotic pressure, that is already leaked into the into the interstitium. So the pulling of fluid into the vessel through the venular end will not occur here. That is the most important thing. So the fluid will accumulate within the interstitium, right? So that will produce the swelling of the inflammatory area, that is tumor. It is also a cardinal sign. So swelling of the inflammatory area is called tumor. It is due to fluid. It is called exudation. It is called exudative fluid. You know, I will discuss about exudation, transudation later on in the video, in the next part of the video, next part of the lecture. That exudation, what is exudation? Exudation is a protein rich fluid which is coming from the vascular compartment to the interstitium due to increased permeability and increased hydrostatic pressure, reduced osmotic pressure in the site of inflammation. That is exudation, and the fluid is called exudate, right? The exudate fluid which is accumulated over the area of inflammation is that produces the tumor, the swelling of the area. Okay, so I'm moving to the next slide, that is hemoconcentration. Now look, as the fluid from the vascular compartment has shifted to the interstitium, in the blood vessel the fluid is very less, you know, so the concentration of the RBCs are increased, and it will increase the viscosity of the blood, very less fluid and very, very clusters of RBCs are there. So that will increase the viscosity of the blood vessel, so of the blood. So the next is the stasis. As the fluid is leaked, fluid is reduced, blood volume is reduced, so there is less blood flow, the pressure is less, there is less blood flow, and due to this, large number of RBCs are accumulated within the microcirculation near the inflammatory area, and that will produce the erythema or redness, that is known as rubor, another cardinal sign of acute inflammation. So you get it. So due to the stasis of blood, due to leaking of blood into the leaking of fluid into the interstitium, there is very less blood, the blood flow is reduced, blood pressure is reduced, and that will lead to accumulation of RBCs around the microcirculation of the inflammation, that will produce erythema or redness, that is called as rubor. Okay, so these are the vascular events of acute inflammation. These are the vascular events of acute inflammation. And the last topic I'm going to discuss today will be the cardinal signs of acute inflammation. Very frequently, the cardinal signs of acute inflammation, the definition of inflammation, and the vascular events of the inflammations are asked in your written exam as well as in your orals. Okay, so it is very important topic. The whole inflammation is an important topic. I will cover all the parts of important aspects of the inflammation in the later two parts of the video. I mean, next videos of my series of inflammatory videos, right? So next topic is cardinal signs of inflammation. Okay, so the cardinal signs of acute inflammation are calor, tumor, rubor, dolor, and functiolasa. First is calor. Calor means, I have already discussed, it is local rise of temperature, and it is due to the increased blood flow. The blood flow is increased, so more bloods are coming to the area of inflammation, so that makes the area hot, that is calor. Next is tumor. Tumor is another thing I have already discussed. The tumor is due to the accumulation of exudate. Due to exudation, the exudate fluid, protein rich fluid from the vascular compartment within the interstitium, it is accumulated, and that will produce the tumor, the swelling of the area, right? And next, that is rubor. What is rubor? Rubor is the redness or erythema of the inflammatory area. Why it happens? It happens due to the stasis of blood within the microcirculation around the area of inflammation. That leads to rubor, right? Stasis of blood around the microcirculation of the inflammatory area leads to redness or erythema, that is called as rubor. And the next is dolor. Dolor means pain. Okay, dolor means pain. I should write it in bracket, the pain. I forget it, sorry. Dolor means pain. Okay, dolor means pain. Pain is due to, look, what happens in the interstitium, the fluid is there, accumulating fluid, the exudate fluid. It gives a pressure, and with this two chemical mediators, that is prostaglandin E2 and bradykinin. These two are responsible for the pain. Prostaglandin E2 and bradykinin, these two irritates the local nerves. The nerve endings are irritated by prostaglandin E2 and bradykinin. That produces pain. It is very frequently asked, which chemical mediators causes pain? That is prostaglandin E2 and bradykinin, that produces irritation to the nerve endings and producing pain, right? And last but not the least is functiolasa. That means loss of function of that tissue. You know that if there is an inflammation and very severe blood flow is going on, very painful condition, redness, stasis of blood, there is a neutrophil phagocytosis is going on, so there is a loss of function of that area will take place. That is nothing but the loss of function. So that is the cardinal signs of acute inflammation. Okay, thank you. I hope you will like this video, and if you liked it, so please give a thumbs up to my video, and please do share, like, share, comment and subscribe. If you have any suggestions for me, if you want the way of learning to be changed, to be in a different manner, I will try to do that, right? So thank you for the day, and hope you will like it. Please subscribe to my channel. It's a new channel. Please subscribe. Thank you so much.